All right, here we go. It is Stick to F1 with Anthony Mingioni, Jason Myrtetus. We are back with a little recap of the French Grand Prix, a little preview of the Hungarian Grand Prix, some huge news in Formula One as well. And we got a ton to get to in this episode. What is this? Episode number what? Do we know?
12. This is number 12.
Number 12.
My favorite number, by the way. If I had a jersey number or a car number, 12 would be my choice. I've always had a fascination with the number 12. Probably Tim Kerr related.
Yeah, I was going to go Tim Kerr or Owen Gagne. They're the two great number 12s that I think of when I think about that number for sure. Two great flyers as well. Yes. And there's a ton to get into here, but we got to start with the biggest news of the week because we have a guy announcing his retirement, and he's not just any Formula One driver. He will go down as a legend. I mean, Sebastian Vettel announced his retirement. He won 13 straight races in the 2013 season. Yeah. He, all said and done, 53 race victories, 122 podiums over 16 years. The track that he's won at the most is, in honor of him, you decided to do one on F1 22. It was 5 wins at Singapore. He's done it.
Lion of Singapore, as he was known as in 2019. And again, crazy to think about it. It's been that long since the races happened at Singapore that Seb is the last winner of a Grand Prix there, and that's when he was with Ferrari.
And that's his last win in Formula One, and it tended out he's going to get one this year. But 5 wins at Singapore. How about 4 wins in Japan, Malaysia, and Bahrain? And the 2018 win at Bahrain was a huge one because that was a championship battle early in the season with Lewis Hamilton. He actually went on the next week to win as well. After that, he's got 3 wins in Italy, Korea, the Indian Grand Prix, Abu Dhabi, Brazil, Australian Grand Prix, and the Belgian Grand Prix, 2 at the European Grand Prix in 2010 and 11, 2 at Monaco, 2 at Hungary, 2015, which I watched last night, where he started 4th on the grid and just blew by Hamilton and Bottas, and him and Kimi Räikkönen were leading that race. Also, 2 wins at the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, 1 win at China, 1 at Turkey, 1 at Spain, got a home win in Germany in 2013, and a great U.S. Grand Prix win in 2013 as well. He's a legend, and he's hanging it up.
He's got enough. I mean, at this point now for Seb, I mean, he's done just about everything he can do in the sport. He's got a record that I think the 13 straight race wins is going to be. I don't know if it's DiMaggio-esque 56-game hitting streak, but it's pretty darn close considering the amount of variables that are involved in every single race. To have that kind of a string is just a remarkable thing. Early 2010 Seb is. You could brace him up against just about any one of the all-time greats in the sport. That's how good he was. For those who may have come into Formula One a little bit late, obviously more recently, and know the record, but to watch those replays of those races, to see how fearless, he always used to, I still remember, the event in Malaysia, and everybody knows multi-21 and everything with Mark Webber and everything. Yep. But for as much as he says he was scared in that radio call, he didn't seem to be driving that way. He seemed to be the one that was inspiring the fear there in that race. So, I always think of that last championship, and I think about him bowing to the car at the end of it. It was just like, that car was he and that car were one for 4 seasons. That's how amazing he was.
He actually won 9 straight Grand Prix. I'm sorry. He won 13 in a season, which equals
13 a season. That's right. Yeah. It was 9 straight Grand Prix. I knew something wasn't quite right there. That's correct. That's 9.
From Belgium to Brazil.
Regardless,
it's insane.
It's still insane. It's, you can think about, you have some of the all-time great. Lewis Hamilton, could Max Verstappen possibly challenge that? Maybe. But again, it's tough to get that kind of a string together. It just is. And then that's, it's been a remarkable run for him. Youngest world champion in Formula One history. That's going to be a tough one for anybody ever to be able to crack that one. Max was trying to be that, and it didn't quite work. But I mean, it's something else. I mean, he's had a remarkable career, and again, when we all saw it happen, in 20, it's been. He said he's been considering these since 2018, since, he's started to think about the end coming sooner. Because again, we forget, even though he was in his early, 30, 31 at that point, been racing for, better part of almost almost a decade and a half at that point.
Yeah.
Coming into and then going to 2020, and then obviously the difficulties of that season with Ferrari, putting more focus in on the development of Charles Leclerc versus Seb. I mean, you could feel that tension. And then he comes over to Aston in 2021, and he seemed a bit rejuvenated, had some good finishes there. But I do wonder if Aston was on a better footing right now. Does he consider staying longer? Whereas maybe he's looking at the situation and going, this is going to take a lot longer for them to be competitive. And at that point, as much as I'm sure Lawrence Stroll wants him to stay around to, feed into the team and his vast, levels of expertise into their team as they're trying to develop going forward. It's got to be it's got to be a little bit of a tough thing for Aston now, because they now have to start thinking about, even obviously as soon as possible there, who will be in that second seat for their team.
Yeah, I mean, only one other guy in the history of Formula One won 9 straight races. That was in 52-53 when Alberto Ascari did it way back when. And of course, you have the famous Ascari corner at Monza, named after Alberto Ascari. But, I think that does play a part in it. Aston, they put a huge amount of money into the 22 car, and it hasn't delivered on its investment, if you will, with Aston Martin. And I think he's been, absolutely huge for that team, teaching them how to be pros and, how to debrief properly. I mean, they're probably still doing the debrief from France. They probably wrapped that up this morning.
I know. Well, his teammate was saying the one thing he obviously he's gonna miss a lot of things about Vettel, but the one thing he says he's not gonna miss is the length of debriefs.
Mm-hmm. So who's gonna replace him? And I was looking at Lawrence Barretto's column, and he's got some conjecture there of how this could play out. This could really throw the driver market now into a bit of a lot of variables all of a sudden. The obvious option would be Daniel Ricciardo if McLaren walked away from him in that third year, and Alpine's Oscar Piastri is like to be considered too inexperienced for that jump. What about Nico Hülkenberg? He's been their reserve driver. We saw him actually this season. But, where are they going to go here? Could they go to Mick Schumacher, another German, and pull him from Haas? That could be a possibility as well.
It's possible. The one name that I know had been mentioned and has been mentioned for quite a while, he's Mercedes' Mercedes' test driver, Nick De Vries. Yep. I think it's another. They're looking to go
FP1 last week, as a matter of fact, to France.
Exactly. And I think I would actually peg him. Again, it depends on how they want to go forward here. I mean, if they feel like after a couple years, they don't necessarily want to go the veteran route per se. And again, you would seem to be a potential opening for Danny Ricciardo if, in fact, they come to a mutual, if he and let's say McLaren come to a mutual agreement. Now, publicly, he says he has every intention of racing for McLaren. He has a contract through 2023. So I think he has every intention of wanting to race for McLaren in that circumstance. But the other thing I worry about a little bit with Danny, and I think that this is something Aston has to consider, is you have to balance out, obviously, he's got such a tremendous public persona. And that if you're looking for an ambassador to sport or a veteran for Lance Stroll to continue to learn from, although Lance is not, again, he's young, but he's not that young anymore.
No, he's cut his teeth in Formula One at this point.
Exactly. He's had veterans with him. He's had Checo. He has Sebastian.
And maybe going back to his Williams days. Didn't he have Valtteri Bottas at one point?
Yeah, he had Bottas as his teammate at Williams as well. So I think at this point now, if Lance is going to start pushing, and again, the machine's important also in this circumstance as well, someone who is maybe closer to his age in this case. Again, De Vries is not, he's 26, 27, I think, at this point now. So he wouldn't be a young driver, but a lot of people feel like he's made for the sport, and that he can maybe he can push Lance and push the team further along. But I can definitely see from a box office perspective, Ricciardo could be big. But I have my concerns about Ricciardo that, as I mentioned to you before, I have some concerns that he's got a few miles an hour, not as fat on his fastball anymore. And he has to prove a lot to me. I know it's a new machine and everything. And ever since Bahrain, they've been trying to come to grips with, with that car at McLaren, as a lot of teams are. But I think Danny, I would say Nick maybe one, because I think I like that idea, that balance of pushing, of two teammates pushing. Danny Rick's another one, certainly. Nico, I'm just not so sure at this point. I mean, we're getting to the point now where he's rapidly approaching Robert Kubica territory, where he may be kind of locked almost in as a quote unquote test emergency driver. He's had such a wide opportunity. It's not like Kevin Magnussen at Haas, where, Magnussen was away for a season, came back and jumped in and,
although Nico did drive well for Aston this year when he jumped in.
Oh, he did. I will take that in. I certainly take that into account, but I don't think Nico will be their first choice. I think I would look at De Vries. I would look at Danny Rick. Danny's going to be the one that's going to be most publicly if he's going from McLaren, or if they decide to move on from McLaren and McLaren decides to accelerate, say, at Colton Herta. Piastri, we talked about.
That's the big key. I think Colton Herta is a big key here.
He's the key.
How do they really feel about that test that he did at Silverstone and last year's McLaren? That's a big thing.
And then this year, obviously, the test that he did this year at Portimao.
Yep.
Because they had him out there in Portimao as well.
Yeah.
And that's a good test, and that's a great place to test.
Yeah, it's a difficult circuit.
It's a difficult circuit, so that's a good way to see where he is at.
Yeah, so off-camber corners, understeer to oversteer, in mid-corner to end of the corner. That's a tough track to assimilate too quickly.
Yeah, it is. It's a roller coaster.
No question. Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, we'll see where this goes. I think it's going to be interesting now. It's certainly going to be a talking point over the summer break, which is coming up just after this weekend's Hungarian Grand Prix. I can't believe we're at the summer break already. And then we'll be ticking down the days to, of course, Spa-Francorchamps. But one other thing, let's talk about the French Grand Prix real quick. The one thing that obviously sticks out, the biggest talking point, Max gets a win, and it's a maximum point win because Charles Leclerc crashes out, and it's the first time a guy has crashed out of a race from the lead in dry conditions since 2003. And this wasn't mechanical that caused him to crash out. It was driver error.
Yeah, he made a mistake.
And
yeah.
He just gets onto the dirty side of the track there. He's pushing because Max pitted, so he's trying to minimize the damage of the undercut. And by doing that, he just tries to push a little too hard, gets onto the dirty part of the track, and then loses it, ends up in the barrier. Can't find, he called it throttle, couldn't find reverse to come out of that barrier. Mm-hmm. He ends up retiring from the race. And this is exactly what I talked about a little while ago. Like, he's got pedigree, he's got quickness and speed, he is rapid, but he still has some of those mistakes that a champion can't make. We saw it at Imola, and this is a big, big one for him because he was really in a position to win that Grand Prix.
He was, and they desperately needed him to, because again, I think if you don't have Carlos Sainz starting all the way at the back of the grid, fighting up the field, but it put a lot of pressure. And I thought for the good early part of that race, he was handling it well. And then he
gapped Verstappen after, some challenges right away, and was impressive.
Yeah. And even today, I mean, I know with free practice and everything that once again, the Ferraris have the pace and everything else. I feel like it's Groundhog Day, where every time I keep hearing about, Charles' pace or Carlos's pace. Carlos actually is the one I'm actually I'm looking at him a lot this week. And I actually feel like if he gets out to a good start, I think there's a really good chance that he could potentially take this race and get a second.
I agree.
But getting back to Charles, I'm watching the input, looking at the video, looking at see how he took that particular turn first few times, and started to see some inconsistency the lap before. It's like he's kind of got a little gun shy almost going into that turn, and then just I think he sort of may realize he was not pushing it hard enough, and then when he does push it, zoop, he lost it.
And that's a double apex. That's a tough turn to navigate, and you can get on that dirty side of the track really easily. Ferrari, the Groundhog Day part of this too is alive in regards to Ferrari and the strategic decisions they're making on race day. Because as Carlos Sainz is battling to overtake, I think it was Checo, they get on the radio. I mean, he is on the gearbox of Checo to overtake the position, and they're telling him to box really late. And
I don't understand.
I mean, it's like, what are you doing? And then they box him, and there's no way that he can overcome the 27, 28 second pit lane loss, with 10 laps to go on fresh tires. I mean, maybe they saw something on the data that those tires weren't going to get to the finish line, be able to cross it. But
you
gotta be on those medium tires. He was on for a podium.
He was on for a podium, and you have to keep your actual eyes on. I just had this impression that they were looking at data and not watching what was going on.
Yeah, I mean
even if they were watching what's going on, that makes it even worse.
Yeah,
either way, it made no sense to send that message to him if you're watching it and you're seeing he's getting close and on the gearbox, as you said, of Checo, and then to get on the radio, and it's like, guys, either you're not watching the race or you're clueless and making this call while he's in the middle. You don't distract the driver when he's trying to make a damn pass.
Yeah, it's time to zip it and let him do his thing. The funny thing,
get in front. Just let him get in front and then say, okay, you're in front. This is the situation with that. Here's the situation with the tires.
Yep. Well, the thing is both of the Ferrari drivers at this point, while they're driving, they've got to worry about the strategic decision making that's going on the pit wall, because we've seen it at Monaco. We've seen it at several races where there is, not a lot of, great communication on when to pit. Bringing Leclerc in when he shouldn't have come in, and they had a double stack at Monaco. Sergio at Monaco is telling him, no, I'm not coming in. I'm not going to come in now. I'm going to go right from full wets to slicks, which was the right move. And we've seen they also now are questioning the decisions that are being made there. And a driver can't be doing that while he's trying to win Grand Prix. It's just an extra bit of bandwidth in their brain that they can't tap into. You have to have full trust. And I understand why both of those guys are lacking trust in the decision-making that's happening on that pit wall.
And I do kind of wonder when we get to the end of this season, whether or not this is something that Ferrari's higher ups have to look at and say, do we need a change? Do we need a leadership change in the circumstance? Strategist. I mean, I don't know if
Mario Binotto.
I don't know about Matteo. I don't know about Binotto. I mean, it's those old stories that, when you think about, it's war, wartime leader and peacetime leader. When the expectation wasn't quite as great, well, they'll always obviously speak to the tradition and everything at Ferrari and our championships and everything else. But you have to have your team locked in the moment. Yeah. And they just seem like there's too many, like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing.
And the moment's too big.
And that
should never be the case for Ferrari.
Right. And it should never be the case for Ferrari. And I thought Damon Hill had a rather fascinating comment earlier from Sky Sports saying in many ways he feels like, the cooler head of the two drivers right now is Carlos Sainz.
Totally agree.
That he actually in some ways at the moment views him as, quote, the team leader and not Leclerc, when Leclerc's the guy with, you and I watch Peter Windsor all the time on YouTube, and he talks about how, the supple inputs of Charles versus the spikier inputs of Carlos, even though he has the nickname of smooth operator. But, there's a feeling right now that there's a lot of politics going on. And there's always politics going on in Formula One. We know that.
And always at Ferrari.
There always is a Ferrari, but they need someone to basically kind of take the bull by the horns and really kind of say, okay, if we're going to be able to challenge Red Bull in the next few years, because they're the team right now. At the end of the day, Max is a generational talent, and he's got a absolutely perfect, cool veteran head, with the exception, obviously, of the mistake that was made, obviously, by Checo against George Russell, costing them the podium. But that's not going to happen often to Checo.
Yeah,
you're not going to catch him now. You're not going to catch him in that circumstance. So that team is really good. But I also believe in Leclerc, and I believe in Sainz, that they can challenge them. But they need to have the feeling that the team is in lockstep with them, and everything is, the strategy makes sense, the calls make sense to do.
I mean, Ferrari's had the car to be a championship driver winner this year. They've had the car. Now, reliability plays a part, of
PU
course.
has had its issues, yeah.
But, I mean, look, Red Bull's had some reliability issues as well. If they're not in the mix here in the final couple of races, it's a self-inflicted wound from the operation, not necessarily just driver. They've had some self-inflicted wounds there as well. What happened with Carlos at Imola, getting taken out by Daniel Ricciardo. He's had some bad luck, no doubt about it. And every driver's going to go through that. But let's get to this weekend, because it's the last race before we head to the summer break. Summer break last year seemed like it was just crazy because of Bottas and the driver market and everything. It's a little calmer this year. But the Hungarian Grand Prix, if we go back to last year's Hungarian Grand Prix, and Bottas totally missed his breaking point, took a bunch of cars out, and really created one of the most dynamic races of the season. We had a maiden victory for Ocon. We had the defense from Fernando Alonso on Lewis Hamilton. It was
10-lap
great
defense.
Yeah, I mean, just
there's a chance there. There was a good chance, because Lewis was really on his horse up until it, and I think he could have challenged
absolutely
at the top end had Fernando not held on for 10 laps the way he did. And we all know how difficult it is to pass at Hungary to begin with, but especially, Fernando, who's just it was a masterclass of watching these two guys go at it with each other. And it was one of the best races. It was one of the best races of the year. A surprise win, a maiden victory for Esteban Ocon, and I'm sure he's thinking about that coming into this, into this race. All these things, you got to say, Alpine is on a really good run right now.
Yeah,
coming into this race, and they've given McLaren the what for, and that, I mean, Lando. Although I will say, Lando had a really good practice today. Lando sandwiched. Lando did sandwich the two Mercedes in the previous race in France. So Lando seems to be kind of coming together right now. That battle right now is getting juicy. But I think, we're looking at a messy quali tomorrow with the weather reports not looking good at all. There's definitely, and I'm pretty sure there's rain forecast that I'm pretty sure for tomorrow's qualifying session. So it's going to be very interesting in this race. And add to the mix, I just got the piece here from Motorsport indicating, and this could be Verstappen talking a little bit, pulling a Hamilton here, but saying that Red Bull can't compete with Ferrari in Hungary in the dry after the practice sessions today. And I think that could very well just be Max, learning from Lewis, but numbers were what they were today at both FPs. That they looked that Ferrari does look really good in this, and if it stays dry for Sunday,
yeah,
it'd be interesting. But quali is there's a chance, just like we saw in Canada, weather can throw a real spanner into things here for the start for this race.
Like Joe qualified 7th in Canada in the wet.
Guan
Yu, I mean, amazing. So Ferrari sweeps both the practices on Friday. FP2, really the kind of the crux, the big one. Leclerc with a 1:18.445, 2/10 on Lando Norris in that McLaren for the second fastest. And then Carlos was third quickest. He is down 2.31 tenths. And then Max Verstappen with Red Bull is down 2.8 tenths. To Leclerc as well. And then Danny Rick comes in at 5 here with the quickest lap. I'm surprised Perez was 9th. I'm not sure if they were trying some different things and some higher fuel runs.
I think they were. He was running slow a few times today. But I think that was intentional. I think they were maybe testing some things out, and I would keep an eye on FP3 tomorrow. But again, the problem is that if they're in the wet tomorrow, there's not much testing going on. It turns into a survivor session.
Yeah, if it's wet tomorrow for FP3, you're just preparing your car then for qualifying. And the thing is that data you gain in FP3 is only good for qualifying if it's going to be a dry race. Right. But I'm a little worried about Checo right now. But back to Ricciardo, I mean, 5th fastest in that McLaren at the Hungaroring, and then Fernando at 6th, and Sebastian Vettel, on the heels of the announcement of his retirement, is 7th quickest. George Russell, 5th quickest. Perez, and then Valtteri Bottas. Hamilton outside the top 10 as well. They look a little off the pace this weekend after a double podium last week in France, where you picked Russell to be on the podium. I picked Hamilton to win it, and he was in the mix there. So maybe
I wasn't saying I was punching my fist in the air when I saw George on the podium there, but we both could be happy with our results there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mercedes, that was a great weekend for them last week in this season where, I mean, they still race victory and they've got a good amount of podiums to be doing what Mercedes is doing with the issues that they have had so far this year.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing when you look at it from a result standpoint. It just speaks to how that outfit, how powerful it is.
It's powerful, and also the fact that, again, George has a certain level of, I think, an aggressive nature to him that maybe Valtteri didn't quite have towards the latter part. He is kind of pushing things along. I think he's been consistent pretty much all year and getting on a podium. Do I think George is the next one? Do I think he's going to get a race win at some point this year? I think there's a good chance of it. I think the machine, I think circumstances will have to play in his favor a little bit in order for him to get a race win this year. But overall, again, they've overcome for the most part the mechanical issues that they've had to get performance. Now it's a matter of they're going to try to challenge for P2 before the end of the year.
Yeah, we'll see if the porpoising comes back for them though at Spa and Monza.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen. It's not going to happen as much, obviously, here at Hungary, and didn't happen as much. Although I have expected it to happen a little bit at Paul Ricard, but it really didn't. So a lot of that, I think they're attributing a lot of that to some of the floor work that they've done as well, and some of the other. But when we get to Spa, that'll be the ultimate test to see, how much if those things come back.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I can't wait for Spa, but I do like the Hungarian Grand Prix. For a track that's really difficult to overtake, there's been a lot of really good races at the Hungaroring. 2014, Danny Rick, that win he had there. Yeah. Unbelievable, right? And 2015, Vettel, what a start to that race. And then Hamilton thinks that Nico Rosberg and that little chicane double moved him and sent him into the stones, and he dropped back to 11th, but he battled back in 2015. Ultimately, Vettel wins that race. It's a track that has got so many twists and turns to it and slow and medium speed corners that it's so technical. And, how you're going to be able to work your tires this weekend is going to be massive. If it's dry, what's the track temperature going to be at the Hungaroring? That's the big thing, and how those tires are going to, and which teams handle that DEG better than others. It's almost certainly going to be a 2-stop, I would think, in this race, So we'll see how it plays out. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, though. I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah. I mean, we always look forward to every one of these races, but especially Hungaroring, because you want to see, invariably going into turn one, how hard of a steep turn that is there at the start. And then you're often shooting a little bit there, getting down into the valley and seeing who can kind of get up in front there. And overtakes obviously are always a difficult thing there and it's so difficult to get a lot of power down and a lot of flow, but that's the challenge of it. And that's what I think why racers do like it. We often jokingly talk about how much faster it would be if they raced Hungaroring in reverse.
Oh my God.
It would be much faster.
Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah. It almost like that steep turn would almost be like that last turn, almost like a slightly sharper version of the last turn of Coda.
Yeah.
That's what it would remind me of. But yeah, you would flow into that early curve, coming down, curve again, and then try to go flat and then go in reverse. I think someone did that once where they simmed it in reverse and they said how much faster the times were.
I'm going to try that on F122.
Go backwards. Oh.
Yeah, do a backwards. Set the stopwatch on the phone and go backwards and see if I can beat my lap time there. I think I'm at a 1:16.1 or 1:16.3 at the Hungaroring, and I'm pretty good at that track. But I mean, the last winners here. I mean, you had Ocon last year, and obviously variable conditions, and we all know what happened there. Hamilton 3 wins in a row there: 18, 19, and 20. Vettel, and then Hamilton back in 2016. Vettel in 15, as I mentioned. Ricciardo. And then prior to that, in 2013, Lewis wins it in the Mercedes. 2012, he wins it in the McLaren. He won it back in 09 in the McLaren. He won it back in 07 in the McLaren as well. He's got a lot of wins at this track, so
he does, and
it could be a factor.
And we also mentioned track. He's the lap record there too from 2020. Mm-hmm. So I remember watching that race, and it was in the wet too. I mean, he set the lap record and then just dominated the race right after that. That was the race. That was not the season opener. That was the second race, I think, in 2020, wasn't it? Hungary, first one. I forget because Bottas won. I think the first one.
Well, the first two were at Austria.
First two were at Austria. I know Bottas won one of those races, and then pretty much Mercedes went on a. They just it wasn't even a season. It was just they dominated.
Yeah,
the year in 2020. But yeah, he loves that track, and would it surprise me if he came out of this winning it? Not even a little bit.
No, me neither. I mean, they don't look like they're on the pace right now.
Nope.
But they could end up on the pace at Hungary, and like you said before, you just don't know. If upgrades and how they will react at this track, because upgrades are getting introduced at interesting times and a lot of variables here. So we'll see how that plays out. But in 2020, you had the Austrian Grand Prix and then the Styrian Grand Prix, both at the Red Bull Ring. And then the second circuit they raced was at Hungary on July 19th.
Yeah.
Then they went to Silverstone for 2 at the British Grand Prix in the 70th. Hamilton won that with a flat tire on the British Grand Prix.
And then Max won the 70th,
Yeah, when he said, I'm not going to drive like a grandma.
One of your favorite lines. Yeah, grandma's out there said, "Oh, really, you little whippersnapper?"
Let's get to the last thing here before we pick our podium. Yes. One more storyline. Well, let's pick our podium first, then we'll get to the Porsche thing with Red Bull. So what's the podium you got for this weekend? Based on what you've seen and a possible wet qualifying, what's your podium this weekend?
It makes it really, when you add a wet quali into the mix here, that makes things a lot more difficult. And again, as much
track position's huge here.
Oh, absolutely. It's tough it is exceedingly difficult to climb here. It's not, Monaco or Singapore level bad, but it's still one of those things you have to consider. I'm having a tough time. And I know I've heard Max's line about, if it's in the dry, we've got no shot. I often feel like that's, but again, can Ferrari avoid self-inflicted wounds? It's been the same story for weeks now. I'm very confident though I really liked what I saw at Carlos Sainz last week. Climbing, and I think he came within really. I like his form right now. I feel like he's on a confident drive, but again, he is going to have to quali in the wet, but I'm going to actually have Sainz winning this race. He's going to get a second win of the season, second of his career. I think Max will battle with Charles for second and third. I'm going to have it split here with a Red Bull split with Red Bull and a Ferrari sandwich here. As much as I think they want to get one, as much as Ferrari wants a 1-2 in this race, I don't think they're going to get it. They'll get, but I will be nice and give them a double podium. Fastest lap again. That fastest lap point is going to be really interesting to see who gets that one. But I'm going to go Sainz, Max, and Charles. Okay,
so Charles will lose further points in the championship. 63 points down right now heading into this one. And he'd love to capitalize on some momentum into the summer break as well, a little reboot of the mental and emotional elements of it. I look at this one this weekend, and I've got Charles actually winning the race. Okay. I've got Max coming in too, and I've got Lando Norris, who's got real pace here. He may be in the mix to win this. He may be in the mix for his maiden victory.
I have him there. See. If we were doing a top 5 right now, I would probably have Norris at 4 or 5. But I do think there's a chance of it. But I definitely think, and again, as much as Lewis is not happy with things, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a problem with any of the other leaders that he jumps. He'll just jump right into it.
Yeah, you leave him an opportunity, and he will grab it, and he is driving well, trying to come to grips with a difficult car. I would have him probably 4th. I'm just not sure where Checo's going to be in this mix. I didn't like his weekend last weekend very much. And we'll see where he ends up this weekend, and we'll see what kind of variable conditions they may get. The race is 3 o'clock local time, and there is about a 55 to 60% chance of some afternoon showers in Hungary, in Budapest. I'm looking at that now.
55 is one of those things where I'm kind of like, when you're in that 50% range, it's a we're in maybe territory. Again, tomorrow seems to be the day where everybody's kind of like going, oh boy.
Yeah. And Martin Brundle always said, "Oh, there's a 40% chance of rain." Crofty will say, and Martin Brundle goes, "That means there's a 60% chance of no rain." But it's the way we look at it, and obviously, wet at Hungary and variable conditions would provide for a lot of different drivers to be in the mix. Fernando could be in the mix there.
That's what I'm saying. Fernando, it wouldn't surprise me even a little bit if Fernando has something to say this weekend. Especially, we saw what he did in Canada. Again, he did a tremendous job in getting to number 2, and it was tough for him obviously to hold from there. But he could throw a wrench into the works here, and maybe make the guys in the lead have to make some adjustments. But we'll see.
I don't think Fernando's ever won at that circuit at Hungary.
Yes,
he has won at Hungary.
His first win of his career was there.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Hungary was his first win. That was his first ever win of his career.
2003. Is that right?
Yeah, all the way back. Yeah, that was his first win. Was Hungary. Wow. Yeah, he's won there.
Okay, so he does have a victory there.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, so, that's right. That was part of the talking point.
19 years ago, so this has been a while.
It's amazing. He still has it too.
I want to see if Vettel can really sort of, after the announcement. That's the other thing. Can Seb get himself into the? I'm setting a mark of trying to see if he can get himself. He pushed last week against his teammate, and they were 10 and 11 at the end of the French Grand Prix. Can Seb get himself into the top 10? Can he get into legitimate point territory here? Last year he had, took advantage of the situation at turn 1, but obviously we all know the fuel error that led to his disqualification, which sucked. Because that was such a fun thing to watch last year with Esteban and Sebastian going at it in that race.
No doubt.
That's for me. I want to see if Seb can get a point. He looked good last week, pushed his teammate pretty good. They got points. Now can Seb get some for himself and maybe give Aston something good going into the summer break, because it's been a rough one for them this year.
Could change the driver market if they can show something that may be a little bit more attractive. Let's get to the last thing here. We've got Porsche and the F1 buy-in of Red Bull. We've got some details. First detail of Porsche's planned 50% buy-in of the Red Bull Formula One team have been revealed in legal documents ahead of potential announcement next month. So it looks like Red Bull is going to, be in partnership here. Mm-hmm. What do you make of this news?
Well, going forward, unless, again, Honda's not coming back, and right now they're currently, I often wondered when they announced that they were sort of making their own powertrain. Going forward, I still felt like they needed to have a manufacturer behind them in some form here. And with Honda has talked about sort of getting itself maybe back into Formula One again, but you need to have, and this is, again, the question is going to be, is Porsche going to eventually be the brains behind the power unit for Red Bull? And technically then for 2 teams, because AlphaTauri is going to be using, you would end up probably using the same unit. That's the question that I have going forward. But this is Porsche's, part of the big Volkswagen family in this circumstance. And to me, it seems like it's a natural fit. But again, and listen, they've had history. Red Bull has taken chances before. They did it with Honda coming in, and it worked out. German engineering, backing them up here in this circumstance could be another thing as well. There was not only that, but also the discussion of Audi, I know, is looking at potentially, was mentioned for Sauber, possibly going forward but that's not as far along as what we're about to hear, I think. But I know Audi wants to get in on it.
They're looking for a 75% acquisition of team shares.
Yeah, and then Audi. That would, the possibility is we could be heading into 2025 with the possibility of 5 different power units in Formula One in that circumstance. You subtract, it's nice. 4 now.
5 different engine sounds.
5 different engine sounds, which I'm sure, that makes all us gearheads excited thinking about, hearing that auditory and how those engines are going to sound. But that's the big thing to me. And it seemed natural that Porsche and Red Bull, I was wondering whether Porsche was looking to start their own team, but there's really, if you want to buy in on Red Bull Motorsports and develop it, to me, that's a perfectly natural partnership there.
Yeah. And we'll see how this plays out. And it's a big story. I guess the last thing too is, did you see the news that Vegas is going to, after the inaugural race, is going to run the weekend before Thanksgiving every year, which is cool.
Yeah. You and I were briefly. Yeah, I was looking at that post as well, I believe, from Adam Stern from Sports Business Journal.
Yeah.
And he indicated that that's the plan, is that they'll do the initial one then, and then after that before Thanksgiving, which I think is it's a smart play to do it. Then we knew November
was just travel things there too.
Yes, because you don't want to do. Yeah, exactly. You want to avoid the biggest time of year for travel in the United States is Thanksgiving. So if you can avoid that, that's something you definitely want to make sure to be able to do. It's going to make it very interesting for next year for sure. But then after that, it's the right way to go. And again, 3 U.S. races now, one in the spring now, one in the early fall, because COTA's always
week before.
Actually, not that. Yeah,
week before. Exactly. Is that before Halloween usually, that race?
I believe so. Yeah. See, it's early, and then of course one more coming back here for Vegas. I guess we're going to need to see how that schedule is going to sort of play. You still got South Africa coming
Mexico,
in. You got Mexico, but South Africa's going to be added, obviously. China will invariably be back on the schedule, although whether or not that will be early in the season, if they do more of an Asia, Micronesia sweep with Australia and Japan, and we'll see. Again, I know they want to set this schedule in such a way where it becomes like a proper, almost like a musical world tour, where you stay in an area for a little while, because the constant crisscrossing back and forth for different races, going from Monaco, Canada, back and forth and back and forth. I know from a environmental standpoint, that's something that they have to be very conscious of, especially with the plan of going zero carbon by 2030.
Yeah.
And that's something that they need to, if you're going to globetrot, you need to kind of make it like a North American tour, Asia tour, get most of the European races in at a certain point, maybe again at this point of the year. It makes perfect sense.
No doubt. Well, we've certainly covered a lot in this episode 12, season 2 of Stick to F1 with Anthony Mingioni, Jason Myrtetus. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. That'll help other Formula One fans find this fine podcast, and we would appreciate that as well. Everybody enjoy the Hungarian Grand Prix this weekend. We'll break it down next week, and then we'll go to summer break and count down the days to Spa-Francorchamps, where we were robbed of a race last year. Yes. Everybody, thanks for listening. We appreciate it. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk.